Hello, I'm Liam and welcome back to Austin 7 Adventures. In this episode we're going to have a look at this RP Box Saloon that's taken up residence in my garage. In the last video, we took a trip to visit the pre-war Austin 7 Club, who have loaned me one of their cars for a year to learn about vintage motoring. After a brief drive around Lincolnshire, scattering bits of second gear all over the place, they gave me the keys and we made it back to Mansfield unscathed. You can catch up with that film here, and remember to subscribe for our next adventure. Today I'm excited to show you some of the features of this lovely little car and talk a little bit about the Austin 7's history. Let's go back to the 1920s. The Austin Motor Company's Longbridge plant had been used to make munitions during the First World War, but by 1921 the company was on the edge of bankruptcy. Herbert Austin, however, had a plan. The story goes that Austin couldn't convince the receivers to back his idea for an affordable, everyday car for the people. Perhaps they'd never heard of the Model T, but he went ahead with the project anyway, funding it himself and drawing up the plans in his own billiard room with the assistance of 18-year-old draftsman Stanley Edge. By mid-1922, Austin, Edge and several expert assistants delivered the plans to the Longbridge factory, where 3 prototypes were built. The Austin 7 was born. Before long, the economy car for the masses had saved the Austin Motor Company. Production started in 1923 and ended right before the Second World War, and in that period 300,000 Austin 7s were made. This included sports saloons, tourers and even vans. The car was produced under licence around the world. Herbert Austin had internationally brought car ownership to the everyday family. Sometime in 1933, our Austin 7 left Longbridge. With a longer wheelbase and rear-mounted fuel tank, this was known as the RP Box Saloon. If you're interested to learn what all the different letters mean and how they relate to the body styles and the different upgrades the 7 received during production, I've put a link in the description to a really good booklet by Graham Baldock. In the mid-1970s, the car was purchased by Dave Wilcox, who proceeded to restore it in his single garage, completing the work in 1984. Dave bought the RP Saloon in a tatty but sound condition, and although in the trade of graphic reproduction, taught himself the skills of restoration by reading books. This is long before YouTube, of course. Beautifully restored, the car was a credit to Dave. Among the documented adventures he took the Austin 7 upon were various trials and even a John O'Groats to Land's End run in 1992. David's excellent restoration of this saloon really has stood the test of time. When the pre-war Austin 7 Club came to look for a car for the Classic Car Loan project, well, this really was a very suitable candidate. Having purchased the car from Dave's wife, Graham Beckett passed the car on to the club, giving it a new lease of life as part of the Classic Car Loan project. The RP was the last of the box saloons. As well as having the 5-gallon fuel tank at the rear of the long wheelbase chassis, the car now sported a 4-speed gearbox and this new offset instrument panel behind the driver's wheel. It's a simple affair with gauges for fuel, oil pressure, dynamo charge and speed. Not that the fuel gauge is particularly accurate. In fact, I usually dip this car with a stick just so I know exactly how much fuel I've got. I'd love to know what little idiosyncrasies your cars have got, so leave us a comment down below. In addition to the gauges, we have a key switch for the ignition, along with a combined charge switch and light selector. According to my book of the Austin 7, the charging switch should be kept at the position most appropriate to the season. This is to ensure the battery is kept in good condition without being overcharged. There's a 2-position light switch and a main beam switch here on the back of the steering column. Here on a steering wheel there's a horn, plus hand controls for the accelerator and the timing adjustment, which we talked about in the last video. And that's really all there is to it, apart from the electric starter, which is located behind the steering column. And as for the driving experience, well, it's exactly that, it's an experience. I mean, the gear changes have to be absolutely rev perfect, there's no synchro mesh. Even the driver's handbook prescribes double declutching. And in addition to that, I mean, the brakes, well, you have to measure your stopping distance in, well, days or months, not meters. And I've driven 60s cars with drum brakes, but this 30 years earlier, I mean, it's a world apart. The brakes are cable operated and the pedal is good, but there's just no retardation. So it's fine anyway, because it's not like you're going to get anywhere fast. But having said all that, there is just a charm to it. I mean, it's so simple that you're so connected to the driving experience. I mean, I feel every bump in the road, every little twist and turn, I have to think so far ahead. It's unlike everything I've ever driven, but I love it. Externally, the RP is very similar to other variants of Box Saloon produced between 1930 and 1934. I especially like the sliding roof on this one, and the opening front window is a 1930s nod to air conditioning on sunny days. And there's even a wiper for rainy ones. This is Britain after all. Under the bifold bonnet, of course, is the 747cc engine. Economical and easy to maintain, the Austin's tiny engine gives out 10 horsepower, just about adequate for the little saloon. In actual fact, by the time of the RP Saloon, improvements to the cylinder head, carb and manifold increase the power figure to a whopping 13.5. To me, it's easy to see why the 7 was such a success. Sir Herbert Austin's vision of producing an everyday car for the people not only saved the Austin Motor Company, but it also put car ownership in the hands of thousands of families around the world. I mean, let's not forget that the very first BMW was, in fact, a produced under licence Austin 7. Their appeal remains true today. Enjoyed by enthusiasts of all ages, the 7 is an adorable reminder of the charm and simplicity of pre-war motoring. Thanks to restorers like Dave Wilcox and societies like the Pre-War Austin 7 Club, their legacy will live on forever. Next time on Austin 7 Adventures, we are going on a 400-mile round trip down to Bewley for the Pre-War Austin 7 Club's National Rally. Now, whilst we're on the drive there, we'd like to spend it answering some of the questions that you have about this old car and our experiences with it. So if there's anything you'd like to ask, please drop a comment down below or send us a message on Instagram. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.